In this video, we're going to cover written report versus oral report. So, who normally presents a report in a meeting? Let's take a look. The officers present reports. Boards present reports. For example, the executive board might present a report to the General Assembly. In this case, the board selects one of its members ahead of time to present the report. If the chairman of the board is also the presiding officer of the assembly to which the report will be presented, then the chairman should not present the report, and the board should select another one of its members. In this case, we'll say the secretary was selected. So the secretary presents the report. Committees also present reports. For example, the membership committee might provide a report on the latest membership numbers. The chairman of the committee presents the report, unless he is unavailable or for any reason wishes not to make the report. In such a case, the committee selects another one of its members to be the reporting member and present the report. In another example, a special committee may have been created to perform a certain task, to research a certain situation, or to consider a particular motion and report its recommendations to the body that appointed it. The chairman of the committee presents the committee's report unless he declines for any reason, in which case the committee selects another one of its members to present the report. Also, staff members might present reports in a meeting. For example, it is common for an executive director or manager to present a report to the board and to the assembly of the organization. Robert's Rules of Order provides the following. For the report of a board whose chairman is also the presiding officer of the assembly, the secretary or another one of its members acts as reporting member. Robert's Rules of Order goes on to say, in the case of a committee, the committee chairman is the reporting member unless, because he does not agree with the report, or for any other reason he does not wish to give it, in which event the committee chooses another one of its members. Now, the officers will commonly report to the board what they've done between board meetings, and they may include recommendations in their report. The officers will also report to the assembly of the organization at the general membership meetings. It is also common for an executive director or manager, if the association has one, to report at board meetings and at general membership meetings. Committees generally report to the body that appointed them, unless a specific rule or directive provides otherwise. And, of course, the board does not report to the board, because that wouldn't make any sense at all. But the board should be presenting reports to the General Assembly. The purpose of this video is to answer the question, should reports be written or oral? To answer this question, we need to define oral report. Most people tend to think that when an officer or reporting member of a committee is recognized by the chair for a report, that member just starts talking off the top of his head and makes a few jokes and summarizes what's been happening, and most people think this is an acceptable oral report. It is not. That's not how it works. There are only a few specific instances where an oral report is in order, and an oral report has a specific format. Robert's Rules of Order states, all committee reports should be submitted in writing, except as noted, for particular types of brief reports in a small assembly. We will now cover those particular types of brief reports. An oral report may be made under the following circumstances. If a motion was referred to the committee, and after deliberating on the motion, the committee recommends no further motion, or recommends that the motion be adopted or rejected, or postponed, or amended by only a few words. For example, the reporting member of the committee might say, the committee recommends that the motion be adopted, or the committee recommends that the motion be postponed to next month's meeting, or the committee recommends that the motion be amended by striking out $100 and inserting in its place $200. If a subject was referred to a committee, and if no motion was referred to the committee, the report can be oral if the committee recommends a motion. In such a case, the motion must be in writing, but the statement of recommendation can be given orally. For example, the reporting member of the committee could say, the committee recommends the adoption of the following resolutions. The reporting member would then present the written motions or resolutions. It is never out of order for a report to be in writing. A written report is always acceptable. However, it is almost always out of order for a report to be oral. So let's take a closer look at written reports. Written reports should be written in the third person. For example, the President's report would state, on June 14th, 2000 whatever, the President met with a general contractor to discuss the possibility of expanding the offices. I recommend that an officer keep a list of dates and activities taken in the role of that office. This makes it extremely easy to compile an officer's report for monthly meetings, And when the annual meeting rolls around, the officer can quickly compile his annual report from this information. Now, as an example of a written report from a committee report might state, the Building and Grounds Committee received estimates from 3 companies to paint the clubhouse. While the committee found each company qualified to perform the work, one stood out as the clear top choice. The report would then go on to include as much detail and information as the committee decides is appropriate. A written report should generally express what was done by the officer or committee since the last report. Or, if there is no previous report, it should express what was done since the officer was elected or the committee was appointed. Reports should be clear and concise without extra commentary. However, the report can contain anything that the officer wishes, or in the case of a committee or board report, whatever the committee or board decides. And it should be noted that a board or committee report is the report of that body, not the report of its chairman. So, in order to be the report of the board or committee, it must be adopted by that board or committee. The chairman cannot simply speak on behalf of the body. On this point, Robert's Rules of Order provides the following. A report of a subordinate board or a committee is an official statement formally adopted by and submitted in the name of the reporting body, informing the parent assembly of action taken or recommended or information obtained. Robert's Rules of Order also states, except as noted in this paragraph, a report of a board or committee can contain only what has been agreed to by a majority vote at a regular or properly called meeting of which every member has been notified, or at an adjournment of one of these meetings, where a quorum of the board or committee was present. Robert's Rules of Order then clarifies the exception to this rule. In the case of a committee, however, if it is impractical to bring its members together for a meeting, the report of the committee can contain what has been agreed to by every one of its members. So, if the committee is unable to meet due to its being impractical, agreement to the content of the report requires something substantially greater than the usual majority vote. It requires unanimity among the members. And the ability to agree to a report in such a way is exclusive to committees. This cannot be done with a board report. Robert's Rules of Order makes this clear by stating, a presentation of facts or recommendations made merely upon separate consultation with every member of a board must be described thus to the parent assembly, and not as an official report of the board. So let's take a look at how reports are presented in a meeting. The president says, for example, the next item of business is the report of the fundraising committee. The chair recognizes the chairman of the committee. The committee chairman then says, the fundraising committee reports the following. He then reads the written report of the committee exactly as it was worded by the committee. The president then asks, are there any questions on the report? And members may ask questions. Then the reporting member hands the written report to the secretary, who files it with the records of the organization where it will stay forever. This same process is followed by officers when presenting their own reports. For example, the vice president would say, the vice president reports the following, and would then read the written report exactly as it is worded. And after the presiding officer allows the members an opportunity to ask questions regarding the report is turned over to the secretary to be placed on file, becoming a permanent part of the records. The minutes will only say that the report was received and placed on file. The minutes should not summarize the report or contain the actual wording of a written report. So we see that reports should be written, they should be brief and concise, they may contain recommendations, and they are kept as permanent records. Now, even though we've covered that reports are meant to be written, I know some people are going to say, what's so great about a written report? So I will present you with a question that I use in training seminars. Are an oral report and a written report essentially the same thing? Yes or no? When I ask this in seminars, the general response is that they are, in fact, essentially the same thing. But they are not. I will now attempt to convince you that they are vastly different. And when we're talking about an oral report here, we're not talking about those certain instances where it is permissible to present an oral report. Those times when a committee is simply recommending the adoption or rejection of a motion. No, we are talking about when an officer or the reporting member of a committee gets up in a meeting and talks about certain subjects, actions, or recommendations instead of presenting a formal written report. That's what we mean by oral report here. So we're going to evaluate these two approaches. written report versus oral report. We're going to compare these two types of reports in 6 categories. First is accuracy. So when a report is written, it is drafted, rewritten, and proofread. So the presenter has an opportunity to perfect it and ensure that it's accurate. When a report is presented orally, all of it, or at least some of it, is off the top of your head. And it is easy for inaccuracies and imprecise language to sneak in. So for accuracy, the written report is going to prevail. Next up is accountability. One of the great things about a written report is that no one can change your words. Because remember that the written report goes on file and can be referred to later, in some cases to prove what was or wasn't contained in your report. On the other hand, with an oral report, what you say can be remembered different by different members, and the reporting member or officer could honestly recall saying something different than what he actually said in the report. So, for accountability, the written report is going to get a check mark while the oral report receives an X. Then we have longevity, and this one is really simple. Remember that a written report goes on file and lasts forever, whereas an oral report vanishes as soon as it's given. There is nothing left to refer back to except the memories of those who heard the report, and those memories tend to disagree, with those disagreements growing wider over time. So this one is clearly another victory for the written report. Next up is equal member access. With written reports going on file and becoming a permanent part of the records, they are available to all members, even members who couldn't make it to the meeting, even members who joined the organization days, months, or years after the report was presented. That is genuine equal member access, whereas on the other hand, oral reports are only for those present, since no one else has any access to them. And please keep in mind that these types of oral reports are not in order, but we are evaluating their merit for a better understanding of why they fall short of proper written reports. So in this category of equal member access, it's clear that written reports win and oral reports fail. Next up is time consumption. Written reports can be distributed in advance, and their reading can actually be skipped in the meeting while still allowing members the opportunity to receive the information and to ask questions. And even if the written report is read in its entirety in the meeting by the reporting member or officer, reading a clear and concise written report takes very little time compared to trying to compose an oral report on the spot, even if you have detailed notes to consult. And an oral report often contains extra commentary, since the reporting member or officer is drafting the speech as he's making it and is trying to remember the details as he goes along. So, with time consumption, the nod definitely goes to written reports. Finally, there's clarity and completeness. A written report will be thought out and double-checked before it is presented, while an oral report will often have errors and omissions, since it is being created and presented live. So, for clarity and completeness, the written report gets a check mark, and the oral report receives another X. I hope this helps you to see the wonderful benefits of written reports and helps you to understand why oral reports are inferior, generally a bad idea, and almost always out of order. I commonly say, if you don't have a written report, you don't have a report. And that covers written report versus oral report.